But IMAX Enhanced, for your viewers, is not, as you mentioned just before we got on the pod, Shane. There's not a lot of content available right now in IMAX Enhanced audio. Disney Plus has announced that they're going to start doing more, so that made it a bigger priority for us. We had most of the work done on this quite some time ago, and it was the Disney Plus announcement that really forced us to push it on through, because suddenly there was going to be at least an appreciable amount of content available.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a bit of additional content that has been announced, and it remains to be seen when we'll get it. But as you said at the beginning, Marvel, which is part of Disney now, most of the Marvel movies are going to be coming out in IMAX Enhanced. I suspect they'll also still have ATMOS, so it'll be interesting. You'll be able to compare the soundtracks. But one thing that is a little bit different about our implementation, so for your listeners, IMAX Enhanced audio is a specific instance of DTSX. It was developed by DTS for IMAX. And there are certain things about our implementation that are unique. First of all is that when you're using IMAX Enhanced, normally it's like a 12-channel system, the way it's designed, and that's the information on the disc. With the Neural X upmixer, which is DTS's upmixer, we will be able to expand those 12 channels to take advantage of as many as 30 channels in anybody's room, depending on how many speakers they have available. And I don't believe that anybody else, well, certainly nobody else has that as yet. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do it, frankly, but we'll find out. There's another difference, which may be on the next slide. I should probably check. Okay. Well, yeah, it is sort of on the next slide. Another thing that I had read about, and perhaps you've read it too, in the past, was that DTSX was announced originally as a 12-channel full range. Every channel was full range. There was no LFE in the soundtrack. It was just 12 full range channels.
Right.
Actually, in some of the content that we were given for testing purposes, that looks like it's not really true. It does actually. It's an 11.1 format. It does have an LFE, which makes more sense. But some of the early announcements or press releases or whatever led me to believe, anyway, that it was going to be 12 full range channels, and that was it. And then another part of it was they were advocating for a 70 hertz crossover for bass management, which always struck me as odd. I mean, you should be choosing that frequency based on your speakers and your room, not based on what you happen to be watching at the moment. All right. And then on top of that, they have a feature in IMAX Enhanced called True Bass, which is supposed to beef up the bass. It's really just a bump in the kind of the mid bass area that's designed to make sound bars and fairly modest speaker sets sound a little more impressive than they would otherwise. Because of all of those things, we asked IMAX, and they granted us the ability. We said, look, we have incredibly flexible bass management. It's all set up based on the speakers in the room and what works best in that particular environment. Why would we want to change that? It's only going to get worse if we just go to some sort of arbitrary standard. And they're letting us do that. So in some implementations of IMAX Enhanced, it's just something else to look for. Not everybody can afford an Altitude 16. I get that.
Right.
But if you're buying something else, just find out what they're doing about bass management. At the very least, I would want bass management that was under my control rather than under IMAX's control, and bass management that was really pretty flexible, because all of those channels can be full range. So, and very few people have 12 or more full range speakers in their room.
Right. So by default, should IMAX already switch it to full range? by like the default?
I'm not sure how other people are implementing it. We were given permission to just kind of continue doing what we already do in
Right.
terms of base management. So that's what we're running with. We firmly believe it's the only approach that makes sense, frankly.
Are those DTSX soundtracks mixed hotter than the standard DTSX?
I'm not sure I have enough experience to comment on that. I think it remains to be seen. I mean, I think I have one IMAX disc, so who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see. It wouldn't surprise me. This goes a long way back, but back when we were talking about 5.1 or 7.1, like back in the 90s, people frequently said, "Oh, DTS sounds so much better. It's more spacious. It's bigger. It's just more fun." And then if you actually did the measurements, if you had a soundtrack that was mixed both ways between Dolby or DTS, typically the DTS mix had 3 dB hotter signals in the surrounds, and that's most of what people were hearing. It sounded more spacious because the surround speakers were a little bit louder.
Right.
Both systems work really well, and whether IMAX mixers, I think this is more up to the guy who's mastering the soundtrack than it is probably to IMAX. But the guy who's mixing it is going to do what he wants to do. Our job is just to make sure it's reproduced accurately.
I've also heard that IMAX Enhanced is the straight theatrical mix. Any truth to that?
Again, it depends on how the movie was mixed. I mean, Dolby is the 800-pound gorilla, and there are more ATMOS capable mixing studios now than all the others combined. That's not to say that we shouldn't be supporting all those others, because again, somebody presses play, it should just work, right? It shouldn't require a lot of involvement on the owner's part. But it's up to the people who are mixing. If you look at Ford versus Ferrari as an example, because right here on YouTube, if you haven't seen it already, there's maybe a 10-minute long kind of mini documentary on how that soundtrack was made, and interviewing two of the people that mastered that soundtrack, and that was all done in Atmos. But if you watch that, you get an idea of the creative possibilities when you're doing one of these sophisticated object-oriented multi-channel mixes. And it really is in the hands of the sound designer more than the format.